So once again, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this gardening series class. It's going to be on flowers in low water use gardens. So today we have Antonio Sanchez with us again. He actually did our first class of the year, which was low water edible gardens. So we're really excited to have him back. Just a couple of housekeeping items before I pass it over to Antonio. We will be recording this class, and you will receive a follow-up email that'll have a link to this class. So if you miss anything, you'll be able to go back and see little parts that you may want to refresh on. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, if we could all keep our microphones muted, that'd be great. And if you do have questions, we can use the chat feature. And then we'll kind of regroup at the end of the PowerPoint, and we'll be able to ask Antonio those questions. And if anyone does want to unmute, we can do that as well. So with that, I am going to go ahead and pass it over to Antonio. So Antonio, welcome. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, all right, Stephen, thank you. Thanks. How many folks we got here? We got, looks like 19, 18. All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm excited to be here again with Ventura Water. Thank you, Stephen, for inviting me. I live in Ventura, grew up, well, not grew up, but I was born in Oxnard, grew up in El Paso, Texas, which is desert, Chihuahua Desert. And now I'm back in Ventura County. I love this area. And there's a push lately. There's been a push by a lot of people for a lot of years, but now the general public is pushing to have low water gardens. And my goal is to make sure that your low water gardens don't look like a lot of the hillsides look in August. The hillsides are amazing. It's amazing what can survive out there with no water for months and months, but sometimes they look like they haven't gotten watered for months and months. So I have some tips, some plants, a lot of experience, and that I would love to share with you guys. And I will probably learn a few things from you as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Before I start, I definitely want to give thanks to so many folks that have helped me along the way. I've been in Ventura County in Oxnard and in Satacoy since 2000. And my family's from Oxnard and Santa Paula from the early 1900s. And I've been lucky enough to be working with plants for a long time. I started off in farms growing crops. And then in school, I switched from crops to growing native plants. And it was a rough transition. It's really hard to go from watering every 2 days to watering every 2 weeks. And you kind of don't trust that your plants are going to survive. And so I have killed a lot of plants. And I still, unfortunately, on a yearly basis, kill a lot of plants. But I've been lucky enough to work at some of the, I think, best native plant places in California. And this talk will not only cover native plants, but I think, we have plants from the Mediterranean, like rosemary, olives. We have plants from Australia, like the kangaroo palms, the acacias. We have plants from South Africa, like the proteas, the aloes. We have plants from central Chile that are starting to get some recognition, like the puyas and the calendrinias. And then from the deserts, there's just so many great low water plants that we can use. But I want to emphasize that I've been working with native plants because a lot of people consider them, unfortunately, some of the hardest low water plants to grow because they just love to die when we give them too much care. And so I want to show you, believe it or not, how to care less. In most of your life, you want to care more. But today I would like to show you how to care a little less. And I want to hype up where I work. I work at the native plant nursery here in National Parks, or National Recreation Area in Newbury Park. We're part of the Santa Monica Mountains, from Malibu, Newbury Park, Thousand Oaks, Agora Hills, Calabasas, a bunch of cool spots. And we do have a bunch of volunteer opportunities and some free classes too. There's a list of them. If you guys want to join us in the field, there's a few volunteers with us today out in the field collecting milkweed seed. It's a pretty fun event for folks who are over 10 years old and, can walk off trail. We do have a cuttings class August 13th. So we'll do a propagation class out here. Everything is free. We're offering it to the public. I have a native food class August 20th. And then there on the top, you can see we have a 7-week native plant horticulture training class, which will, it's focused on native plants, but you can apply it to proteas, you can apply it to rosemary, you can apply it to succulents, agaves, aloes, etc. And it's basically how to collect seed, how to do cuttings, how to install plants, how to grow them in your own house, and how to do landscaping and maintenance with them. So if you guys are interested, you see my email down here, antoniosanchez@samofund.org, and we would love to see if we can welcome you for that 7-week training program. It's a limited program. We only take about 15 people. And these other ones, we take as many people as we can get. Honestly, we'll take 1,000 people out there collecting milkweed seed. There's a lot of milkweed seed. And so the schedule for today is going to be, I'm going to do a few tips just in case folks are barely getting started with low water gardens, or they're interested, right? Maybe in removing their lawn. I'll give you a few tips on maintaining it once you actually have that in. And I'll give you a few tips and stories on stuff for year 3, year 4, year 5, and beyond. Of course, we're going to go over plants. We'll go over resources. We'll go over video. I'll have a few videos to show you guys. I'll show you about more free classes. And then as I was writing this PowerPoint, I'm like, why do I use so many exclamation points? I don't know why. This just seems exciting to me. Hopefully it seems exciting to you guys. Any questions through chat? Stephen, are you on? Is that true that we should ask for those questions through chat?
Yes, I will be monitoring the chat. So if anyone has questions, they can feel free to just type them in the chat.
All right, perfect. So here we go. Let's go ahead and get started. And I would love to, in the chat, hear where you guys are at in your gardens. Maybe you're like, yeah, I'm going to remove my lawn this year and I'm going to put in a low water garden. Cool. Or I took my lawn out, a few years ago and my low water garden looks really bad. I killed almost everything. Or I have a beautiful fruit garden and I want to add some low water color. How do I do that? I would love to hear where you guys are at, because then I can direct a little bit of the talk maybe to apply to your situation. And it's a small class, right? So we only have about 21 people here. So I would take advantage. If you guys have specific questions, I would love to try to answer them. I said I've had over 15 years experience doing native plants. I used to run a native plant nursery, retail nursery right there in Midtown, across the street from Target by Lassen's, called Nopalito Native Plant Nursery with my cousin. And we sold everything. We sold the figs, we sold proteas, all sorts of low water stuff. So I have a lot of experience with low water and native plants. So I'd love to help you guys out in this next hour that we have together. So getting started, I think a lot of folks, when we're talking about 12-month low water gardens, I think a lot of folks go to Green Thumb, which I love Green Thumb, go to Home Depot. I'm not going to give you my feelings about Home Depot, Lowe's, and all these other great nurseries. And they just buy whatever, and they buy what's in flower. And that might be a good way to buy like a magazine. If you see a magazine with someone attractive on the cover, or like a story you want to read, that might be a good way to buy a magazine, but it's not a good way to buy a plant. And I found that if you just take this first tip here, when we're doing low water gardens, a lot of our low water plants are going to have a downtime. Doesn't mean they go to sleep. It doesn't mean they look ugly, super, super dead, but they aren't flowering and they aren't full with leaves. And so a tip that I learned a while back from a landscape architect friend of mine, and it's something that a lot of folks use throughout the desert and throughout the Mediterranean regions, is to use plants that are evergreen. And let's just compare 2 of the most common low water plants in California. Rosemary, which most of you probably know, has a beautiful scent. People use it for cooking. You can use it as a ground cover or an upright hedge. And lavender. Lavender, beautiful plant, great flower, great smell. Lavender has a downtime. Lavender goes semi-dormant. It doesn't drop all of its leaves, but it does drop some of them. And there is a time when it's not flowering and when it's not super full. Whereas rosemary has no downtime. Rosemary is like LeBron James. Rosemary is always ready to get in the game. It's green all year. It flowers a lot of the year out here on the coast. And so those are 2 different types of plants. One is an evergreen and one is a semi-deciduous plant that goes dormant or it has a downtime. And so I found that if you can design your garden with at least 50% up to 75% of those beautiful evergreen plants, it doesn't mean they flower all the time, but they're green all the time. They're full all the time. And what that does is it attracts your eye to those spots. And so when lavender is flowering, it's beautiful. And when lavender is not flowering, sometimes it has this downtime. But if you have a ton of rosemary surrounding your lavender, it almost shields, it almost draws your eye, the shiny green and the crispness of crispness. Is that a word? of rosemary draws your eye to it, right? So that's one that has worked well for me, and for a lot of folks too. Another design element that I love to use is we want to plant a lot of times, not all the time, but we want to plant in groups of 3s or 5s, or 7s, or you could do the math out up to like 12,468 or whatever that multiplies out to. For some reason, the eye, and a lot of folks find it more pleasing when we have these groups, these odd number groups of plants. Sometimes we'll go to Home Depot to Green Thumb and we'll buy just 1s or 2s. And a lot of our stuff represents much better if we have it in clusters. And the third tip is I like to use strong focal points, something that attracts your eye, that your eye immediately is drawn to. If you guys know what an agave is or an aloe, those are sharp. Well, the agave is usually sharp and the aloe is usually not sharp, but they have this very mathematical formation to them, as a lot of succulents do. And they tend to draw your eye, especially big, strong, bold colors of agaves and aloes. So I love using those. And I think they make the garden a lot more pleasing to look at. And kind of along the same lines as I like to use accent plants. So those are plants that are usually upright, but they make a statement. They're almost like an exclamation point in the garden. I'll show you guys an example of those. And then I love using young plants. You guys need to use more young plants. I see too many people planting 5-gallon plants, which they usually cost about 22 to about $50. And the small plants usually cost about $4 to $8. And what happens is the small plants get established so much faster. They're not used to the pot yet. When you're in a 5-gallon pot for over 2 years, sometimes you get used to the pot. And so we found that a lot of plants get established really slow, and they grow really slow, or they don't get established at all when we plant too big a pot. So I want to encourage you guys to buy small, like a quart size, a 4-inch size, a 6-inch size. Even a 1 gallon is still small enough. And you usually have very, very fast success. And here's the probably the most important tip I can give you. And it sounds ridiculous, especially like I said, coming from my farming background, it sounds ridiculous. But the first 2 times you water, I would like for you to try to give your plants 2 to 5 gallons of water each. And I know that sounds ridiculous. It sounds absurd. The first time I heard it, I didn't believe it, and I didn't want to try it because I thought that's not how we do things. In a farm, in drip systems, when you plant tomatoes or lettuce, you just throw your drip system, you throw your plants in, your seed, and you throw the water on for 5 minutes. And then you come back the next day and you throw it on for 5 minutes. And so what does that do? It keeps the soil wet, but it doesn't get the root ball wet. And that's what we need to do with our drought tolerant plants. We need to send the water under the plant. And there's really no way to do it with the drip system, because drip has spacers, right? And they're usually a dry space in between. So even if you have a drip system, which I 100% am fine with doing low water plants, we want to try to hand water 2 times and to give the plants 2 to 5 gallons. Trust me, I have planted this way for over 10 years now, and it's almost bulletproof, and it works. It does take a lot of time. If you only have 3 plants to plant, it takes very little time. If you have 150 plants to plant, it takes all day. But the benefits are worth it. Your plants establish so much faster. They're drought tolerant so much faster. And I can get something low water like a manzanita or a sage watered twice during the winter. And then I can water it once a month and be very successful and have flowers almost all year with those plants. And so an example of an accent plant would be this guy right here, Our Lord's Candle. But again, we could use any, it doesn't have to be a succulent. It could be a grass. There's a bunch of beautiful grasses that folks are using as accent plants. And I like to include this map when I can, because it shows us where, when I'm talking about native plants, where these plants occur in native nature. All of these blue points are natural occurring points of Our Lord's Candle or Yucca. You guys might know this one from our hills. It's beautiful. Sometimes it hides in the hills. It's about 2 or 3 feet tall. And then during spring, some of them will flower. They send up this beautiful white flower. So I don't grow this for the flower, because once the plant dies, once the plant flowers, it actually dies. But you get about 5 to about 12 years worth of this beautiful low water succulent accent plant that I just adore. I love this icy blue color on these Euphorbias. We can use it up in Ojai, past Ojai, up into basically Mount Pinos. It can handle 5,000 to 6,000 foot elevation. or it can be really close to the coast. It doesn't accept salt spray, right? So it doesn't do that first level right against the beach, but anything the next zone in, it's completely happy with it. And this guy needs absolutely no water. You can water him 6 times a year and he'd be super, super happy. Here's a few more examples of massing. So there's 3 juncus right there, beautiful accent plants right next to each other. They're probably about 2 feet away from each other. And there's a small list, very, very small list. There's so many more we could use of plants that we can use as accents or focal points. Sometimes they're the same thing. You can see how this juncus is upright and it's almost acting like an accent, right? It's like it's a little bit of salsa on top of your burrito, right? You have a beautiful burrito. You spent a long time making the tortillas and you got your beans in there. Cool. Let's throw the salsa on there as the accent. This is a horrible metaphor. And I did not eat breakfast, so you could tell what I'm thinking about. But a lot of these are either focal points or accents. And there's so many more that we could use in the low water garden. So now that you have your low water garden, I think it's super important to figure out when the dry season is and when the wet season is. When the wet season is, which I consider November to April, and I admit that it's usually not wet at that time. November has been very dry. April has been very dry. But what I mean by wet season is that when you add water, it stays in the ground, right? If you have clay soil, like most of us do in Ventura, you add water from November to April, and it usually stays in the ground. And why is that? It's because the sun is not as high in the sky. It's because there's not as much sun those days, a lot shorter days. And so whatever water you put in the ground usually stays in the ground much longer than if you were to water now, right? You could run a drip system in December and that water will stay there for a lot longer than if you run the exact same drip system this time of year, right? If you run it for 30 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever your timer's at, it's going to stay a lot longer than the winter. So that's our wet season, right? And when is our dry season? Our dry season is just opposite of the wet season, May to October. And so we want to water 2 different ways. And I think this is important because during the wet season is basically when our plants are working out for a marathon. They're getting ready for a marathon. And when is the marathon? It's during the dry season. They are not used to plants. Mediterranean plants, olives, are not used to water during the summer. Kangaroo palms are not used to water during the summer. They can handle a little bit of water during the summer, but the second that we just put our irrigation on, just like it was a lawn, bad things happen. Our kangaroo paw leaves turn black. They start to dry out in the middle, and in a few months, they're rotted out. So let's keep track of when the wet season is, and that's when we actually want to apply most of our water, and when the dry season is, and that's when we want to time our irrigation. Okay, so once the dry season hits, it's May. May 1st, in my mind, is you are passing the baton. If we're going to use our Olympics reference, I haven't even watched that much Olympics. I feel bad. It's kind of weird though. There's no one in the stand, so it's a little bit weird. But I don't know why I'm talking about the Olympics. Anyways, the javelin, what's it called? The baton gets passed off from April to May. May, long days. Even if it's not hot, the days are long, and that means a lot for the water you're putting in. But those plants aren't used to water during that time. So what we do from May to October, and this has worked very well for me, is that we water every 10 to 14 days. If we have specific questions about your irrigation system, I'd be happy to answer them. But we found that every 10 to 14 days is the sweet spot for most low water plants once they're established, right? So we run our drip system about every 10 to 14 days for about 10 to 20 minutes. Our pop-up sprinklers go for about 30 to 45 minutes every 10 to 14 days. And hand watering, it depends on how big your area is, but hand water usually doesn't take more than 20 or 30 minutes. That's all we're looking for. All we're trying to do is refresh our plants, and they love it. Imagine you're running a marathon, which is what our plants are doing, right? There's no rain, hot weather, lots of sun from May to October. Imagine you're running a marathon and someone was to give you a gallon of water during that marathon and say, here, drink this immediately. That would be hard to do. That's so hard to do. That's what we're doing in July when we put our drip system on for 45 minutes and then come back 5 days later and put it on again. We're asking our plants for every quarter mile to drink a gallon during their marathon running. Instead, give them a cup of water, or better yet, have a garden hose out there and spray them. Imagine you're running a marathon and then someone sprays you with water. Oh, that feels so good. That's all these plants need because they're not used to water, but they love a little splash. They love the monsoon. Did you guys feel that rain a few weeks ago, that little monsoonal rain that we had? Our plants perked up so much. And why is it? It's a light rain that washed all the leaves off. It got everything clean. It got a little bit of the roofs and the street clean, but it washed a lot of the dust off of our plants, and it lightly moistened the soil, but it didn't get into the ground. It wasn't a gallon of water during the marathon. It was a cup, and that's what we want to aim for. Another thing to keep your garden looking amazing during spring, summer, and fall is once our plants are flowering, the smaller plants, you want to deadhead the ones that can be deadheaded. This is more of a maintenance issue. And I do have a maintenance class free. There's a free summer maintenance class. I believe it's next Saturday or in 2 Saturdays. I should probably know the date if I'm going to promote it. But it's on our website. And we show you guys how to water during the summer. We show you how to deadhead during the summer. And I think that's super important. Deadheading is basically taking a plant that's flowering, removing the flower as it dries, and promoting that plant to flower more. And that's how we get a lot of our plants to keep flowering. There's some plants, like we'll take an oak tree, for example, that will only flower once during the year. And that's it. You can't remove the spent flowers on an oak and expect it to flower again. But most of our shrubs, our lavenders, love to be deadheaded. Our lavenders love to be deadheaded. If you wonder why your neighbor's lavender looks better than yours, it's probably because you're watering it too much and you haven't deadheaded it. You haven't removed the dead flowers. And what happens is the plant thinks, hey, I was flowering, I got pollinated, I was going to set seed, but that seed didn't mature. Somehow it broke off. And what a lot of our plants do is they flower again, but you can't wait till the whole plant dries up. You have to aggressively deadhead. You have to get in there as the flowers are drying up. If you wait too long, the plant usually thinks that it's set enough seed and it will rest for the year and usually won't flower again. And so when we're doing low water plants, to me, Thanksgiving to Martin Luther King Jr. Day is when we do most of our work. We do most of our maintenance at this time. We do most of our installation at that time. We do most of our fertilizing at that time. It's just a great time to do maintenance. And we can usually take most of the summer off. And I love to copy lavender farms as far as fertilizer goes. So there's 3 farms. Like I said, I come from an agriculture background, and I love replicating what we can in a sustainable way in our gardens. So let's think of olive orchards, which are low water, which should be low water. Most of them are. Let's think of grape vineyards, which here in California, there's some dry farm grape vineyards or very low water grape vineyards. And then let's think of lavender farms, right? So lavender's from the Mediterranean, the olives are from the Mediterranean, grapes are native to California, but also to the Mediterranean. And so these folks, a lot of the more sustainable growers are using very low water, and they're producing a crop that they can sell. In your garden, you're not necessarily trying to sell your stuff, but we're trying to make it beautiful. And so why not try to copy what they're doing if it's sustainable? And what I found is most lavender farms, the really good low water sustainable ones, are pruning back their lavenders in winter, early spring, which is when we recommend most of our maintenance, but they're fertilizing with compost. They're not going to buy a liquid fertilizer. They're not using a chemical fertilizer. They're basically taking compost and putting it on the side of their rows and letting the rain wash it in slowly. And so compost will feed your plant over months. It's a beautiful, not even really a fertilizer. It's more like a multivitamin. But most of our plants, the low water plants, don't need that much, right? But if you are going to prune your lavenders back every year, we do want to feed them with something. And so what we found works is worm castings or some fresh organic local compost, and it works wonders. And we apply that while it's still rainy or it's still cold, which is December, January, February, or March. And so this is an example. These heucheras are an example. These are coral bells, which we highly recommend for under part shade oak. Us in the native plant world, we love using these under oak trees. But the problem with them is they flower for about 3 or 4 weeks and then they're done. But they don't have to. We can keep them flexible. We can keep them lightly watered. And so every 10 to 14 days is when we water them, and we aggressively deadhead them. As these flowers are drying up, we go in and we remove the flowers all the way to the base. You take the stalk all the way down to where you can't see that there was even a stalk there. And it's not all of the flowers. Some of the flowers will still be pink in this case. So the ones that are drying, you take the stalk all the way down, And if you do that, you can usually get 2 to 3 months of flowers out of your plants instead of the 3 to 4 weeks that can happen, especially in dry years. And this is a huge technique that I think folks can use. It might be a little too much work for people. I could understand that. But the good gardeners are out there every 2 weeks, maintaining, cutting, lightly watering, keeping their plants from going dormant, because heuchera, these coral bells want to go dormant. In native nature, they shrink back when there's no water, but we keep them evergreen by just adding a little bit of water, right? It's that marathon. We're not giving them a gallon. All we're doing is throwing a little bit of that splash, right? A cup of water. And they love it. And I'm going to go to, now that you've had your garden in, and maybe you've killed some plants. I know I kill a lot of plants. I want to talk to you guys about just a few lessons and I think ways of thinking about low water gardening that have helped me out a lot. I think one thing that I hear a lot is people are afraid to plant in their clay soil, or they're afraid to try a plant where the nursery or like the website or the big bad person at the nursery tells you can't plant that. It needs perfect drainage, or it needs good drainage, and you don't have good drainage. You have clay soil, so your plant's going to die. And to me, that is 100% a myth. And I don't think it's a lie, because I think those folks are being honest about their experience. But here's my experience. Plants that grow on sharp slopes that are in gravel sometimes love clay soils. What they don't love is heavy, wet clay soil. There's a huge difference between clay soil that's dry and clay soil that's wet. And I compare this to a black widow. I don't know where I'm going with this analogy. So everyone in there, if you have a house or an apartment, everyone has black widows. And I don't know of one person who has ever gotten stung or bit or whatever black widows do. You can tell I'm an insect expert. I don't know what they do. They bite you. I don't know one person. I know they exist, and I know it's very true that they can bite, but it's just not a fact of life that everyone's out there getting bit by black widows. They hide. They're in the shade. They're under leaves. What they're doing there is they're eating insects. So black widows, we actually want them because they do a lot of good for us in our gardens or wherever they're hanging out. But the second that you go to that brick and you lift it up and you find a black widow and you poke it, usually the black widow will run away. It doesn't want to mess with you. But if you keep poking it, what is going to happen? Eventually the black widow will turn around and just bite you. And that's what we're doing with our clay soils. We have this amazing soil that has way more nutrients than the desert sand that you would find in Phoenix, right? Than gravel that you would find in Vegas. We have amazing soil out here. And what we do with it is we stick a drip system on it and we poke it. We poke it every 2 days with water. And we say, we need you to be wet. And the clay soil at first says, okay, I'll give you lots of nutrients and your plants will be beautiful. But after a month or two of too much water, we see plants go downhill really fast. So treat your clay soil like a black widow, welcome them into your garden, and stop poking them, because it hurts. It hurts when I see plants getting overwatered in these clay soils. We don't need that much water in our clay soil. Another example or idea I want to pass along to you guys is most of our plants, this would include rosemary, lavender, and most of the native plants, they belong here. If you guys know the story of Ishi, who was one of the last, what they call wild, I hate that word, but this is the story that you could find, native Californians in the early 1900s, all of his folks had died, all of his people had died. And he was found by a law enforcement person in Northern California out past Sacramento. And the law enforcement guy took him to a museum in San Francisco. He had an anthropologist friend out there. And the anthropologist and Ishi became good friends. And the anthropologist took Ishi back to his homeland. And he said, hey, I would like to see how your people used to live, right? Because his people had all died. And Ishi was able to show him where they got food, where they got medicine, where they fished, the plants that they used for hunting, the ceremonial, everything, because Ishi was from that place. And Ishi needed very little, as long as you have enough people, right? If your group is 20 or 50 big, you have enough people, you know where to get everything. That's our plants. Once you put rosemary in the ground in a Mediterranean climate, it's Ishi back home. They don't need much. What we're doing is we're acting like the anthropologist, and we're going back to visit Ishi. And if you go visit Ishi once a month at his homeland, and say, hey, I got some beer and I got some pizza, you should be like, this is good. I'm kind of lactose intolerant, but let me have some of that beer and pizza. And he would feel it the next day, but he would be happy. But the second that you come to Ishi with pizza and beer every 2 days, we have problems. And we know, and I hate to compare people and plants, but I see a lot of similarities between people and plants. We know that a lot of folks, Black folks, Native folks, Latinos, that have a lot of, that are just from these areas where we've had a specific diet for years. Once we change our diet really quickly to like processed bread and sugar, a lot of us can get diabetes. We have a lot of problems that happen really, really quickly. And I see it with our plants. Our plants don't need all the water we're giving them. They don't need all the fertilizer we're giving them. Most of the plants can't handle it. So I encourage you to look at your plants as belonging here and needing very little from you. And you should be visiting them with a little Caesar's pizza and a 6-pack of Bud Light very infrequently. Think about how often you go out there with the junk food, which is basically what we're giving them, is junk food. And it's okay to give it to them every now and then. But the second that we just give it to them because we think they need it is when we start to see problems. I'll talk to you guys about the CalFlora website in a second. That's the next slide. We found that winter water is very important, even more important, I think, than summer water, because most of our plants want to grow and they want to set a root. They want to get rooted in during the winter. And if we don't have water during the winter, which is the rainfall, right? If we only have 4 inches or 6 inches, when sometimes we're used to about 10 to 18 inches, it's hard to make that up during the summer. And so I would encourage you guys to think about watering more during the winter if we don't get significant rainfall. A lot of times that water is more important than the water we give during the summer. And if you're designing, spring is easy. It's so easy to find spring flowers. What we should be thinking about is how do we find August to February flowers. That I will show you guys a bunch of flowers that fit that bill right now. And desert plants, if you guys have driven from here to Vegas during the summer or from here to Phoenix during the summer, and you've been lucky enough to be in a monsoon or right after a monsoon, when the rains come, a lot of our desert plants can flower the next day after a rain. And so desert plants are actually used to summer water. They're not used to clay soil, wet, but they love summer water. And so I would encourage you guys to use some of our desert plants. They love being watered during the summer. Again, they don't love drowning during the summer, but they love summer water. We just have to watch out in Ventura, especially if we're really close to the coast, we can get powdery mildew on some of our desert plants because it's so foggy. Even in August and September, you'll see it. So it is so cool, especially if you're right against the coast. So you might have to watch out for that. But most places past Midtown, out towards Santa Paula, even, and on the avenue going out to Ojai is perfect for desert plants. If you are doing plants, your low water plants in pots, then they definitely need extra attention. They're not low water anymore. And then we like to talk about tropical milkweed. Tropical milkweed's a beautiful plant, but we're trying to get folks to grow local milkweed. And I do have a whole slide on local milkweed, so we'll go into that in a second. And I think a lot of folks are, instead of just going to Home Depot, we're starting to, and just buy whatever's pretty, I think we're starting to go into Home Depot and ask, where's this plant from? Or what can this plant do for me besides just be pretty? Does it have an edible component to it? Is it medicinal? Do people use it for ceremony, etc.? So I would encourage you guys to find more stories inside your plant. I think it makes a garden more rewarding for some of us. So I've got a bunch of cool plants to recommend and some more websites to show you. But I want to stop right here real quick and check in with Stephen and see if we have any questions we should address or.
Yes, we do have a few questions in the chat. So let me go back up here to the front. Okay, some folks want to see the first slide with your email and also the website where they can sign up for those additional garden classes.
Yeah, let me bring that back up. It's not too far. And I could also pull the date up now. August 21st is the summer maintenance class. What day is that? Oh, it's in 2 weeks. There we go. And then if you just go to Google, you guys probably have never heard of Google, but Google is this amazing thing online where you just type in. So you just type in Samo Fund, Eventbrite. Samo Fund is who I work for. And all of our classes are on there. And that's my email, right? You guys feel free to email me. What else we got, Stephen? Oh, I should leave it right there.
So let's see. So someone said that they had removed their lawn and replaced with Diamondia, and it didn't work out. So they ended up tearing it out, and they're actually having someone coming over to do a redesign. So I think that was kind of a reply to your question at the very beginning of the presentation.
Yeah, Diamondia is amazing, but Diamondia is really hard to do on a grand scale. I think we're kidding ourselves when we're saying that it's a lawn replacement. It's not. It's a great low water, 1 inch tall plant, and we don't have many of those. Not in just in California, in the whole world. It's great in small spaces. It's very easy to maintain, but in large spaces, it gets so weedy. It's so slow to grow in. Corupia. I have a one of the very last slides I'll show you guys is a Corupia. Oh, what's the common name? There's a plant that UC Davis is working on that is a phenomenal low water, legitimate lawn replacement. So I don't want that person to have to, I'm not telling you that's what you should do, but it's very common. And a lot of times it's not your landscapers or your fault. I think it may be us in the horticulture industry just trying to push something that we hope will fill a niche, and it just doesn't. Diamondia is great if you have a bunch of like pavers and steps that you want to like landscape around, where you might put like creeping thyme and all that. Diamondia is perfect there. If you have like a citrus tree and under it you want to, you might put mulch or you want to put Diamondia, that's perfect. But anything past like 50 square feet is really hard to maintain. It can be done. I've seen it done, but it's either just a lot of work or a really expensive landscape company. So don't be hard on yourself. Diamondia is rough.
Okay, and to follow that up, Betty's asking if she needs to use a watering can to irrigate that, or what might be the best way.
To water Diamondia?
Yes.
Yeah, Diamondia, unfortunately, the best way to water anything bigger than like your steps, right? From your like your wherever you park to your front door, anything bigger than that, the pop-up sprinklers are the best. The MP rotators is what most people are going through right now. Drip systems don't work. They just don't cover enough area. It's not a very deep-rooted plant. And so we kind of want to water it like a lawn. It doesn't need the water that lawns need, but they need a blanket watering instead of a point watering, which is what drip delivers. You could do it with hand watering, or you could do it with a water can. It just might take a while if you have a big spot.
Great. And I'll have a plug to follow that up as well. So if you do have these kind of areas that need to be watered with a pop-up or overhead spray, Ventura Water does offer a high efficiency sprinkler nozzle. It's the Toro Precision. So it's just a less output nozzle, and you can apply for those at venturawater.net, and we will come in and install those for you. So that's a good time for me to plug that.
Yeah. And I want to just, back that up, Stephen. I know it sounds weird to use sprinklers, but here's the two things about those. The technology is amazing. If you guys aren't following irrigation technology, which I don't blame you guys if you are, who does, but it's like your laptop. Imagine your laptop. If you guys have a laptop or a computer, imagine where it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, right? The laptops and the computers are amazing now compared to 10 or 20 years ago. That's how they're doing with irrigation. The folks who work in irrigation, it's a business, and they're taking the drought really seriously. And these are amazing sprinklers. They give out sometimes 60, 70% less than the old pop-up sprinklers. And it's just tiny little drops at a very slow rate, and it's wasting very little water. And they're just so precise now. And most landscapers are going to them for larger areas. I can't recommend those guys enough. They're super efficient. They're really well made, and they're cheap.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And Carol is, Carol has said that she had bought a lot of plants from you in the past from your nursery, but then she had lost her home in the Thomas fire. So now she's rebuilding, and she would like to get low water with lots of flowers. Any tips?
Oh yeah, we're about to show plants. So March to July is really easy. What we're trying to focus on is times away from that. March to July, anybody can plant. You can plant anything, basically, that you find in the nursery, and they flower. So just go nuts for those. I'll show you a list and some resources to use to find plants, because I think it's key to find plants that flower on the off times, what we'll call the off times, right? So if you just stick with me, Carol, we'll go over it. What do you think, Stephen? Can I keep going, and then maybe we'll stop in about half an hour for another quick question break?
Yeah, if we just want to touch on one more, and I'm not
sure
if you had already talked, but George is asking if you can talk about a specific euphorbia. I'm not sure if we've already talked about that, maybe at the beginning of the presentation.
No, which euphorbia? There's a lot of euphorbias. Maybe the sticks on fire or fire sticks?
I believe he's asking for your recommendation on the best.
Oh, yeah. So euphorbias. I don't tap out of many questions, but euphorbias are so different. There's euphorbias that get about 18 inches tall and are grown for like their inflorescence, almost like their flower bracts. They turn color. They're really pretty. And then some euphorbias are like trees. The most popular euphorbia, I think, at least probably top 2 or 3 euphorbia in Ventura, is that sticks on fire. It's yellow, turning to gold, and then getting to like orange, sometimes red. You can see them off the freeway right there. I can see that drive on the 101 freeway when you go past Victoria and you have the intersection of the 126 to go Santa Paula. By the police station right there, there's a really nice buildings that have beautiful 5-7 foot tall sticks on fire. They look really good. So it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for an accent, a big, almost like a shrub, I wouldn't use it like a shrub, right? You don't want to use it as a hedge, really. But those sticks on fire are beautiful. They get big though. And then a lot of the smaller, like purple and almost like pink that are stunning, those are smaller. Those are about 2 or 3 foot tall plants. And those I would use more as color spots, because I would stick to my recommendation of that being a plant that has a downtime, because when it after it flowers, it kind of goes dormant and it looks a little ratty. So I wouldn't use a bunch of those, but they're amazing together. You could use the sticks on fire to hold your place all year. They look great all year. And then you can use the purple and pink ones that are much smaller, that are very showy, but then they have their downtime. Cool. So any more questions? I'd be happy to you guys can ask them, and we'll take maybe another question break if we have time. If not, at the very end, we'll definitely take the questions. So just real quick, I want to show you how specific some of this stuff can be. This is a seaside golden yarrow. You can see where it occurs in native nature. I've seen this a few times. It's always within sight of the beach. You can hear the ocean whenever you see this plant. It's always growing in sand, and we try to grow it at Nopalito, right in Midtown, in clay soil, and it did great for about a year. And then we watered it too much, and it died. And it makes sense. It really wants to be in either lightly watered clay soil, which we were not lightly watering that area, or it wants to be in sharp drainage like sand or gravel. And you could see where it's from. It's from that area. It remembers that area. Where if you take another plant like golden yarrow, which is basically its cousin, it's very closely related. It's almost the same plant. But look at this distribution. This is used to much wider circumstances, much wider areas. So this plant is so much easier to grow than the other one. And so when we do native landscaping and even just stuff from the desert and from other Mediterranean areas, we like to find out where they grow exactly, because that helps us inform where they're going to succeed in our garden. So to go back, I could use this one that loves the beach in a garden, but it should be in a slightly mounded area where if it gets too much water, the water runs off. Or it could be on a slope. The slope naturally runs off on, or the water naturally runs off on a slope. But if we have a flat area, especially if it's a shady area during the winter, if it rains too much, it's going to stay wet right there in the clay soil. This would not be a good spot for it. We want to use golden yarrow, which will be successful in all those situations, on flat clay, on that slope, on a mounded area, etc. Just to give you an idea of how specific some of this stuff can be. And so here's another picture. This is one of the most common plants that we use. This is a great plant. It doesn't have a very showy flower, but this plant just never has a downtime. 12 months out of the year, it looks amazing. If they were to add a 13-month in the year, like they just added a game in the NFL, which I'm excited about. But if you're an NFL player, I would be pretty, I'd be like, come on, I don't get paid extra for this game. Anyways, if they added a 13-month, this would look amazing in month 13. I don't even know what the name of that month will be. But this plant I've seen in Riverside cut to about 3.5 feet tall in a mall parking lot looking amazing. I've seen it in native nature under oak trees being about 12 feet tall. We use this as hedges all the time in native and low water landscaping from about 4 to about 7 feet tall. It just looks good all the time. It has really no downtime. And so that's what we're looking for, are plants like that. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to share my screen again. I like how I'm just coaching myself through this. I want to show you guys some videos. And you let me know, please, Stephen, if we are good. I'm going to get these guys up right now. Okay, there we go. All right, Stephen, here goes the first one.
Okay.
This is a video on maintenance, which I think is a huge part of making your garden look good. With lavenders, people are like, oh, my lavender looks bad after 2 years. And part of it is because you're not maintaining it. Here's how we would maintain sages, and lavenders are basically the same thing.
Hi, my name is Jamie, and today I'm going to be showing you how to maintain native California sages in your garden. I will be demonstrating how to lightly shape and heavily prune white and purple sage here at King Gillette Ranch. As far as lightly shaping, this could be done any time of the year. However, heavy pruning should only be done when the plant breaks dormancy. During summer is when the plant becomes dormant, and during winter is when it breaks dormancy. So when you lightly shape, you're just going to be cutting 1/3 down the stem, and you want to cut right above the node where the leaf and the plant meet, because this extra is dead and it won't grow from there. You also want to be cutting these dead flowers off because these won't grow anymore. Now that I've showed you how to lightly shape, which can be done any time of the year, now I'm going to show you how to heavily prune. Instead of taking 1/3 of the stem off, I'm now going to be taking 2/3 of the stem off when I want to heavily prune. When we heavily prune, one thing to keep in mind, this is opportunity to shape the plant how you want to grow it. So as you can see, this plant is a bit lap-sided. So since we're going to be pruning, I'm going to take this opportunity to shape it more evenly. Keep in mind, we don't want to cut our plants too even because we would like a naturally aesthetic look. So cut them a bit unevenly, some high, some low, to keep it looking natural. At this point, it's a really good time to take a step back and see where we're looking at. This is what we want, and this is where we're at. As you can see, this side's a bit lap-sided, so we're gonna go on that side and trim it down. Here I'll be doing some heavier pruning, making sure I cut at the node. So you'll know you're done with heavily pruning when it looks something like this. It's even, it's all trimmed down, and it's ready for the new growth. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned to learn more about native plant maintenance.
Okay, Stephen, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so this is how we prune, and I can't emphasize enough. I will show you guys more plants right now, but I really think that maintenance is the key to keeping our native and low water gardens looking good. We can plant anything and it'll look good the first year or two, but as after year two, it's almost like a relationship, to be honest with you. The first year or two of a relationship's amazing. And then after that, that's when the counseling begin. At least you guys can tell what kind of relationships I have. But so we see this all the time with sages, native sages. We see this all the time with lavenders. They grow beautifully for the first year or two, and then they get too woody. So what, oh my God, I forgot her name. What Jamie was talking about is anytime you guys want to cut a plant, it doesn't matter what plant we're talking about, rosemary, ceanothus, lupins, all sorts of cool stuff, sages, you can remove little parts of the plant at any time. She said 1/3, we can go from about 1/4 to 1/3 of the plant anytime, these smaller plants. And that's basically, you're taking the split ends on your long hair and you're just cutting them. You're just lightly pruning. But anytime you want to seriously shape, if your lavender is open and woody, if your sages are open and woody, we want to do that when the plant is healthiest and growing the most. And for our lavenders and our sages, they want to shoot out during the winter. So you can see, if you can see my cursor on the right side of the screen is something that hasn't been shaped. She only took off the dead leaves. So this was cleaned up, but it wasn't shaped. And now we want this at the bottom left. And if you do that to your lavenders and to your sages, once a year or every 2 or 3 years, they reward you with this fuller, more compact look, and they look amazing. And we always feed them with compost or worm castings after this, replicating what happens in various like farms and all that. You can see I just lost my train of thought. So I'm going to show you one more video because there's different types of sages. There's Salvia Lucantha, which is Mexican sage. Mexican sage is amazing, but it grows way different than these woody sages. Salvia Lucantha, we actually want to cut straight to the ground. And so I want to show you how to cut some plants to the ground. And Stephen, I'm going to put this guy up. And if you could just give me a yes that this guy is playing.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Tammy, and today
Yes.
I'm going to be showing you how to cut and maintain California Fuchsia, or Epilopium Caneum. First thing to know about your California Fuchsia is that cutting back should never be done to plants less than a year old. It also grows by rhizomes, meaning it grows underground. Because of this, we cut back hard in preparation for the fresh spring growth. These are some of the tools we will be using, some hand pruners and shears. Since we're going to be cutting back hard, I'm going to be using the large shears to get rid of all the dead wood. Now I'm going to be using the smaller pruning scissors to be more precise. Here you can see where the new growth has started and the old growth we're going to be cutting off all the way to the ground. So here you could see the new growth that we left. It is a lot smaller and more manageable than the old growth that we cut off. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned to learn more about native plant maintenance.
Okay, cool. So we have all those videos. If you go to Samofund YouTube, unfortunately, we haven't organized them to be on one page. We hope to do that soon, but there are the point is, I want to encourage you guys to be brave about maintaining your gardens because they do need maintenance. And the winter, early spring is usually the best time to maintain them. So that would be for stuff like that California Fuchsia. Yarrows would be the same way. A lot of people use yarrows as color spots. Santa Barbara sage or Mexican sage can completely be cut to the ground. Remember what Jamie said, the first year we don't do anything because we want them to get rooted. But after that, we cut them to the ground and then we always reward them with a little bit of side dressing or compost. And so we're going to focus a little bit on plants that don't flower from the spring because the spring, like I said, I think is super easy to do. We want to focus instead on summer, fall, and then early spring or what we call winter or late winter flowers. And we have another focus here at the parks where I work is to try to feed pollinators too. We're big on attracting pollinators. And we're noticing that monarchs may be actually waking up earlier. And so there's a push to get earlier flowering plants to accommodate the monarchs that maybe aren't sleeping as long as they used to. There's evidence that they're waking up 3 or 4 weeks earlier, which is big if you're used to a very certain plant being a host of your butterflies or your caterpillars. So let's look at a few native early and late flowering plants, and then I'll cover a bunch of non-native stuff too. So some of the easier ones are on this list: sages, coyote mints, the yarrows, kangaroo palms, oregano, which I love. If you guys have never seen oregano flower, you can use it for food, and then it's a beautiful landscape plant, do low water. The tucriums, and of course milkweed. These are, I'm sorry, I jumped ahead of myself. These are late spring and summer. So these are super, super easy. Yarrow, this is another one that you cut straight to the ground. I've seen this used as a lawn. For whoever was going to replace their lawn, this is a much easier plant to grow as a lawn. If you visit the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, if you go up to their new conservation building, they have this as a demonstration lawn, and I think it looks amazing. I don't know if they're cutting it with a lawnmower or a string trimmer. They might be just weed whacking it, but this looks great as a lawn. They have a few other lawn examples too, so there may be something you want to check out. Super easy to grow, great as a pollinator. Butterflies love landing on this. You can use it as a cut flower. And again, if we cut this plant before the flower dries up, it wants to rebloom. So I've had yarrow flower easily 4 to 6 months with work. If you're not going to work and you're just going to let the flowers die down, then you only get about 6 weeks worth of flowers on yarrows. It's pretty common. And so we can get a lot more out of our plants. This one, I love that a lot of the new homes in Ventura, especially out by Satacoy, are using this, these hybrids, and they're probably using Pozo Blue, the Allen Chickeringsberry. They're all basically the same plant. They get fairly big, so about 3 to 4 feet tall, about 5 to 6 feet wide. But such a good butterfly plant. And it's such a distinction. I see this plant in a home where somebody's not watering it and it goes semi-dormant, like a lavender would. And I see it in a landscape where a professional landscape company is maintaining it and it's in full flower. The difference is amazing. You have a full flower, fully leafed out plant that's getting water about every 10 days. And you have a plant in a front yard that's not getting any water and it's going dormant. And so there's the difference we can keep by deadheading our plants and by lightly watering them, just giving them that drink of water during the marathon. They can stay flexible and usually flower a lot longer for us. And so before I get too much into the native stuff, I also want to share with you a resource, because I think the best thing I can do today is give you guys the power to do this on your own. And so I want to show you guys.
For your garden.
I don't want to show you that.
Hi, my name is Jamie.
I want to show you guys this website that I love. Stephen, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can see the San Marcos growers.
Perfect. So unless you're a landscape professional, unless you have a landscape license, you cannot buy from San Marcos. But good news, Green Thumb Nursery. I'm not here to promote Green Thumb Nursery, but I love them. And they buy from San Marcos growers all the time. And here's why I love San Marcos growers. They are in Santa Barbara, and they have Randy Baldwin, who is one of the co-founders, is an amazing plant person. And his write-ups and his descriptions on this website, I have spent hours on here. Here's the list on the left of what he has available. And I just want to show you all these plants that they have available: aloes, agaves, all sorts of cool stuff. Again, you cannot buy anything from them. You have to go, I would go to San Marcos. But let's look up Anisodontia terras pink. And this is what I love about San Marcos, is they will tell you right here in the middle, in this blue box, they'll tell you what this needs. And Randy is a serious plant person. He is, in my opinion, I think a lot of people's opinion, one of the best plant people in California, maybe in all of the United States. And he's dedicated his life to coastal California. So he knows Ventura, he knows Santa Barbara. When Randy says that something is low water, it's because it's low water. When they describe the size, this is a realistic size for coastal California. So anything that he has on his list that's low water, it's going to be low water. And what I mean by low water is water every 10 to 14 days during the summer once it gets established. This is Terrace Pink. Oh, we used to sell this at Nopalito. I love this plant. I adore this plant. It's a South African native. It flowers basically all year. And Randy doesn't lie. He's a very honest nursery person. When he puts bloom time year round, it's because this darn thing flowers all year round. So yeah, I think that if you are just looking, I'll give you another resource in a little bit. But if you're just looking to nerd out and to look at amazing plants and to support local business, San Marcos and Green Thumb, this is a great way to do it. Randy has some amazing plants that you won't find at Home Depot, that you won't find at some of the other nurseries. So I love his website and all the work that he does. And you could just spend hours on here reading about this. So let me click out of here. Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to cover a few native late bloomers. Some of them I'm going to recommend for you, and some of them I'm not. California fuchsia. This is probably our most popular summer flowering native. It goes into the fall. It's a great hummingbird plant. I will show you guys this website in a second. This is UC Davis Arboretum All-Star. They came up with 100 plants that they found were good for clay soil, Sacramento Valley, 100-degree weather. They had to look good for over 3/4 of the year, so at least 9 months. California fuchsia is on the list. This is the one that Jamie on the video cut to the ground. So it's gone for about 3 months, but if you can handle that, it comes back aggressively, and it's just a beautiful late flower that we can rely on in clay soil, in full sun. They even use this plant in Phoenix, so it tolerates really hot conditions. There's some other plants that you might be thinking, why would I recommend this? This is one of them, Slender Sunflower. This is a ratty looking plant in native nature. And the thing is, most of these plants don't get any water for about 5 or 6 months. So I would say that you would look pretty ratty too if you didn't get any water for 5 or 6 months. But what happens to some of our plants when we bring them into horticulture, when we bring them into the garden and we give them that light watering? We give them water every 10 to 14 days. Slender Sunflower becomes a stunning plant and it flowers late. I've seen this flower up until November in the garden, which is really late for a native sunflower. And it's a compact, low plant. I would compare it to Mexican sage, which some of you may know, it's about 3 to 4 feet tall and about 3 to 4 feet wide. So this does not represent what it looks like. This is a native nature picture. In the landscape, it looks amazing. So that's one I would recommend. And then there's other ones that do flower late, but that I would not recommend because they are a little ratty looking, unless you're going for this very wild and a little bit, I don't want to say ratty because I love all these plants, but a little bit kind of wilder. Yeah, I'm not sure what the word is, but these are a little bit more like low water plants. And they look at low water. Even if you give them water, they will not perk up. But they do flower late. And so they are some that we recommend for people, for pollinators during the summer and the fall, especially for monarchs. They're really good. So goldenrod is another one. And some of the Ericameria species, this is very, very common out towards Nevada, going out in the hills, past like Yosemite, and it's just stunning plants that flower during the summer and fall, but maybe not amazing for your garden unless you're going for this kind of deserty wild look. One that I would recommend is up and down the 101 when you drive from Camarillo into Thousand Oaks. It's actually buckwheat. It's a beautiful gray leaf, and then this really pretty pastel white and pink flower. It's flowering right now. It flowers straight into fall. And if you guys have never grown a native buckwheat, then you have not heard the bees and the butterflies just go crazy over this plant. The buckwheats are one of our best native summer and fall pollinator plants. So I highly recommend those. And then we have stuff just like Randy's website, just like that Terrace pink. That was loud. Just like that South African plant that flowers all year. We do have plants here in California that flower all year. Here's a small list of them, and I'll show you guys some pictures. The key with keeping them flowering all year is to just make sure they get a little bit of water. And if it's needed, to keep deadheading them, to keep removing the flowers. So this one, Island Snapdragon, this is from the Channel Islands. You could buy this at Home Depot and Lowe's. It's so easy to grow. It's a small hedge. I've seen it box, so people are keeping it as a square, but it really wants to be this round, just beautiful, like flowing plant. And this guy reliably flowers all year. Verbena De La Mena is from one of the islands in Baja California, and it's just a beautiful round plant, about 3 to 4 feet tall and just a little bit wider. And this guy reliably flowers all year. You can just see these flowers, and you take garden shears, which are basically just big 18-inch long scissors, and you can just cut these flowers as they start to dry out, and this plant reliably reblooms. So I love this plant. And then this is a cool one that you would have to go to Green Thumb for. And Green Thumb orders in plants from Suncrest Nursery. And Suncrest Nursery is the only nursery that grows this. They actually have a trademark on a plant. And there are very few native plants that have trademarks. And this is one of them because it's stunning. It's a mix. So it's a hybrid of a native woolly blue curl and a Mexican woolly blue curl. But I've seen this guy plant or flower over 6 months, and it tolerates clay soil, 100-degree weather, drip irrigation. It's such a rock star bulletproof plant, and it's very, very useful in the low water garden. So I would recommend it if you guys are really trying to get some color. It looks great with lavender, with a lot of our gray and silver foliage plants. And then bladderpod, which you can see a picture of it here with creosote in the desert, full flower, amazing plant that flowers literally 12 months out of the year. For hummingbirds, it's just a stunning plant. Kind of a gray leaf, gray green leaf with this really pretty yellow flower, and using bladderpod next to this woolly blue curl, the colors just complement each other beautifully. And then Seaside Daisies, these are much smaller plants, little color spots, little perennials, but they're very easy to deadhead with shears, and they do flower reliably over 6 months easily. And so I want to show you guys another website that I love going to, and I think is underused. They put so much time into it. It's the UC Davis Arboretum All-Star website. Can you guys, Stephen, can you confirm that you could see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this one I got introduced when we still had Nopalito, when we were still selling plants to the public in Ventura. This came out about 2009, 2010, and they've been updating it since. And so what it is the folks at UC Davis, they do amazing farm work, they do amazing agriculture work, they do amazing horticulture work. So some of the horticulture all-stars, they got a large group of people together in California, and they said, let's find 100 plants that we can recommend to homeowners that are low water, that tolerate clay soil, that look good most of the year, that can take 100-degree weather. And this is what they came up with. And the list has actually changed a little bit over the years. Probably about 80 plants have stayed on there. They kicked a few off, but it's a very reliable list. And what I like about it is you can pull up this brochure. And I'm not going to spend too much time going through all of the brochure, but you can pull up, it's grouped in perennials. So perennials are smaller plants. But what I love here is the bloom season. It'll show you when these flower. And again, UC Davis is reliable. They're really good plant people. And so they're not lying to you. Like some of us, I will admit, some of us in the nursery trade, just to sell you something, will say, oh, it's 2 feet tall, when in reality, we know it's 4 feet tall. Or it flowers 8 months, when in reality, we know it flowers 4 months. So this is reliable information. What I'm interested in here is the bloom season. So when it flowers, and then how big it's going to get. You can tell how big it's going to get by which group it's in. So the perennials are usually small. And some of these are native. I think about 20 are native. I'm going to go up to the shrubs. They got ground covers right here. So there's some good, maybe not lawn replacements, but there's vines and then the shrubs. So acacia, which is from Australia. We have a native California shrub, another California shrub, callistemon, which these are from Australia. So just really good plants that'll show you winter, spring flowers for the barberry, winter, spring, summer for this beautiful purple bottle brush. So I love using this website whenever we're recommending low water plants for people. I think it's easy to do homework. And most of these plants are reliably available. Again, Green Thumb would be a great resource. Man, I should get Green Thumb Stephen, we need to get Green Thumb to sponsor this this talk. It's a great spot to buy most of these. If they don't have them on their shelf, they work with growers who would be able to get them to you. Some great plants on here that you might not see at like Home Depot or some of the bigger box stores. All right, so let me go back to the PowerPoint. Stephen, we're at 11:10. We told people we would go to 11:30. I've got only a few slides left, and I would love to answer some questions just in case now's a good time.
Okay, let's see. We didn't really get too many. We have, Gail did ask me, hi Gail, thanks for coming today. For pruning rosemary, for heavily pruning rosemary, what are the best months? And she's asking if November through April might be the best month.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the rosemary, unfortunately or fortunately, can be pruned any time of the year. What I was recommending for the sage and the lavender is because they tend to drop some of their leaves, and then they tend to leaf out really hard during December and January, and that's when we want to prune those back. Rosemary doesn't drop its leaves like that. It drops its leaves very, very tiny amount all year. And so you could prune it any time of year. The times that I would avoid, and it kind of doesn't apply here in Ventura because it never gets hot, but in general, we want to avoid the hot months, right? So late July, August, and September, we want to avoid from just cutting our stuff to the ground. Because then what happens is we might get some sunburn on our plants, but we also might get, and again, this doesn't really apply to Ventura because it just doesn't get hot enough, but I'm thinking more like ojai and, like calabasas and stuff. If we cut at that time, it's going to trigger new growth on the plant. And some of that young, tender growth can really burn off at that time. So we want to avoid that. Any other time, October all the way through May, June, you're fine cutting it. I could only pick 1 month. I think February would be 1 month. I would just hammer it to the ground in February, side dress it with compost or worm castings, and watch it come back beautifully. Any other questions, Stephen?
Okay, I think that's the only question that we've gotten.
Okay, perfect. So here's a list, and I'll show you a few pictures of some great native plants that flower winter, early spring. So that's about November into about February. Some of these are beautiful. You can have them all year, and then some of them just disappear and they go dormant completely. So it would be hard to design a whole garden around some of them. But I think Hummingbird Sage, which is on the UC Davis Arboretum list, is an amazing plant. This is a cool plant because in native nature, It flowers about four weeks and it goes dormant. It's almost hard to even find the plant after July or August because it just shrinks into the ground. But under oak trees, lightly watered every 10 days, being deadheaded, I've seen it flower from December to June, and we're lightly watering it. So it never gets to go dormant, but we're not overwatering it because we don't want to overwater our oak trees. We're basically replicating a monsoon every 10 days, and we're going in there and removing the flowers. And this applies to so many of our plants, the yarrows, just so many of our plants respond to this light watering and to this deadheading. So compare that 4 or 5 weeks of flowers to 5 or 6 months of flowers, evergreen, and basically looks like a lawn, a 12-inch lawn, or dormant and almost dead looking, right? And that's the difference of us just adding a little bit of care and knowing when to do it. A golden currant, this is another one that's on that UC Davis All-Star list I showed you all. This one does have a very specific downtime, and the downtime is right now, late summer. So it does go dormant, but it leaves out really quick, and it's flowering usually by Christmas, which is really early for a native plant. And hummingbirds love this. It's a really good pollinator plant. And this is one of my favorite native foods. Very easy to eat fruit. So I would encourage you guys, if you're trying to do maybe with your children or yourself, to do like more local fruit or food, this is a great plant to include. There's a few other ones, some currants that are really beautiful. This basically is very similar to the golden currant I just showed you. This is also on the UC Davis Arboretum All-Star list. And then this is a little bit more funky stuff, but this is a super local plant. They call this the Dr Seuss plant. It flowers usually on Christmas. I could find some. I like to take a Christmas morning hike in some of our hills, and you can usually find this flowering, in Malibu and Camarillo and in the Oxnard, the Magoo Hills. So very early flower, great for butterflies, but it does go dormant. It goes naked. It's naked for about 6 months, and it can be a very awkward nakedness. So we tend to only use a few of these as color spots and then try to hide them the rest of the year, unless you're going for just that look in your garden. A few other native plants. Again, I'll give this PowerPoint to Stephen. And if anybody wants it, you guys are welcome to it. These are all early flowering native plants. This is a great desert plant that really responds well to summer heat and summer rain. And it's really cool that this plant grows even along the coast, and you can find it in 115-degree weather. It's such a cool plant. And then my push is I would love to see more elderberry and toyon in our gardens. I think these are two native plants, native fruits that we could be using a lot more to tell stories with our gardens. And one more thing I would love to show you guys, because I know some people, I know I didn't when I first started doing this. I did not trust that you could actually get away with watering a garden every 10 days or every 14 days. I'm very, very hesitant. And, a lot of people that I've learned from showed me, and I did finally get around to it. But I want to show you guys another UC system product. Stephen, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see. Yes.
Okay. So the woman, I believe there's a woman who was asking about the Diamondia. You may want to check this out. So this is UC Davis again, their Center for Urban Horticulture. And these guys, there's just some rock stars on this team. And part of what they're doing are these trials. So they have one in Irvine, they have one in Sacramento. Irvine's not as intense as Sacramento, but it does get about 90. Sacramento's over past 100 sometimes. Clay soil, flat area, full sun. They do have a shade area, but let's just call this full sun. And what they have is different irrigation methods. So they have drip system. Some of these get no water. Some of these get 80% of what a lawn would get. Some of these get 50% of lawn. So some of these get half of what a lawn would get. And then some of them get 20%. And what they do is they invite some of us out. And I've been lucky enough to go out there I drove to Sacramento one time just because I love Sacramento and I love looking at new plants. And we get to rate these. We get to rate what the plants look like. But here's what I want to emphasize to you is I'm going to pull up the 2016, 2018 results. And I want to emphasize that it almost doesn't matter how much water we apply to some of these plants. They look the same. And if they look the same with once a month water or once a week water, what's the difference? If we rate them exactly the same, why are we watering them so much? And so let me show you. This is their final results for 2016. This is all free. You can find this online. So this is what I love. So if you guys follow me, I won't make this complicated, I hope. So 80% is of what we would normally water a lawn in Sacramento or Irvine. 50%, so that's half of what a lawn would get in Irvine or Sacramento. And then 20%, right? And then so we're going on a scale of 1 to 5. 5 is amazing, and 1 is, ooh, don't look so good. So most 4s, that is really good. That means something we could recommend. It looks good. It might be flowering. It looks full. It looks great. So look at this. When you have this plant, this Dietes at 80% irrigation, 50% and 20%, we gave it the same rating. It didn't matter how much water this was getting, whether it was getting half a lawn, half the water of a lawn, or 20%. And some of this was literally 3 times during the summer. Some of these were watered 3 times during the summer, and they still look the same. Look at this Lagrostemia right here, 4.2, 4.2, 4.1, the same rating. Basically, it didn't matter if we gave it almost lawn water or a fifth of lawn water, it still looked the same. A rose, believe it or not, some roses are amazing low water. This rose actually looked better when they gave it once a month water. So if you guys are interested, I would read, they have all these, they go through every so like right here, this Dianella, they'll go and they'll give you the full size of it. They'll tell you what the results were. But I love stuff like this because I think sometimes you'll hear like a landscaper, and for whatever reason, sometimes people don't take us landscapers seriously. And they'll be like, oh yeah, I know he said it was once every 10 days, but I'm just going to water every 5 days just to be safe. So these guys have PhDs and this is what they do for a living. If you don't trust me, trust them. And this is how California is changing landscape wise, because we're starting to recommend some of these plants to Green Thumb. We're starting to recommend them to San Marcos if they're not already growing them. And this is how we get new plants into our stores. And it's a really cool thing. And I think it's something that if you're interested in it, has a lot to offer. It'll show you how they water. It'll give you the irrigation system they use, the drip system they use, etc. So I found a lot of use off that. And I love seeing that. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint, and I got one more slide, I think. And so just a few more resources, because I think the best thing I can do is give you guys tools to just do good work in your garden. So this is my favorite book on low water gardening. It's by Greg Rubin. He's done over 500 gardens in California that are low water. And he wrote a great book called The Drought Defined Garden. He has an amazing website too. The San Marcos website, like I just showed you, is beautiful. The UC Davis Arboretum All-Star list is great. If you guys have a chance to go to Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, go now. Don't go during the spring. It's so easy to find flowers during the spring. Who cares? I mean, I care, but let's not worry so much about March, how beautiful it is. We should go during August. What looks good at the garden in August? And that's what you want to focus on in your garden. Matilaha Nursery is a great local nursery in Moore Park that does a really good job with low water plants, mostly native. There's a great little stand at the Ventura Farmers Market right there in downtown. A guy from Ojai, I believe, who's selling local natives and some medicinal plants. One of my favorite nurseries is up in out by the Chumash Casino, Yes Nursery, and she delivers out to Ojai, I believe, every 2 or 3 weeks. And so you can find her on Instagram. And then I think Green Thumb Nursery is a great spot to find some of these plants too. And so I will put on these dates that we have. We would love to welcome you guys to help us collect a seed, to learn how to do cuttings of rosemary and sage and manzanitas, just to help us plant. Right now we're planting a bunch of seedlings for restoration, and we offer free plants if you help us out. So we give out free milkweed, free white sage, and then we do all sorts of cool stuff. If you guys have kids, we are going to start some children's classes in October, twice a month. And so I would just look on our SAMO Fund Eventbrite for that. And apart from that, I would love to take any questions, Stephen, or hit any topics that people felt I didn't go through enough.
Okay, so we just had one additional question that came in, and that was from George again. And
Mhm.
he is asking if you were saying that there was a Diamondia lawn at the Santa Barbara Botanical Gardens, and what area that is in.
Yeah, no, negative. Sorry if that came across. No, there is a yarrow, Achillea millefolium, the yarrow. There's a yarrow lawn. And all of that is I used to work at the botanical. All of that is across the street up the hill. So you just have to cross the street and walk up the hill, and you'll see it at the top of the hill. There's a brand new building up there. There's 3 different lawns right next to each other, and so you can see them all at once. There's a Budalua gracilis, which is I forget the common name, but there's a Budalua gracilis. That's the scientific name. Lawn. There's a yarrow lawn, and then there's a carex lawn.
Okay, and then Gwen just came in with a question, and she is asking if the classes that you will be hosting, are those on Zoom as well?
So we're trying to do stuff in person now. The cuttings class is in person. We work outside. You're welcome to wear your mask if you'd like, but we don't enforce it because we're outside. When we're inside, we do, but we don't step a foot inside out here. When we do field collecting, August 14th, that's all outside. This August 20th native food class is online. The August 21st maintenance class is all in person. Yeah, and then all the milkweed collecting. Most of our stuff is in person now. I do have a few classes like an introduction to native plants, like the 30 best native plants for your garden. Those are online. But all the seed collecting, all the maintenance stuff, it really just needs to be in person. And we're lucky enough now to be able to do stuff in person.
Okay, great. And Carol is asking, what are you doing to control underground growth of salvia, like lipstick salvia?
Underground growth. I don't know that lipstick salvia has. So let's make sure we're talking about the same plant. I think you might be talking about hot lips salvia. Is that the one you're talking about? It smells, the leaf smells like grapefruit, and the flower is white and red.
I'm not getting a response back from her just yet.
Okay, maybe she might be out.
Yeah.
Controlling her sage.
So Gail says, thank you for the great presentation, and she can't wait to geek out on the reference website. So
I love those websites. Yeah. So
go ahead.
Yeah, I'll touch. So there's basically, I mean, there's a lot more than this, but I covered 2 different types of sages and the maintenance of them. One was the native sages that are woody. We compare them to lavenders, and those we want to cut when they wake up, which is December, January. The other sage that I covered was Salvia Lucantha, which is Mexican sage. It's that beautiful purple plant that's everywhere. And that plant, if you look at it, it actually grows soft stems from the ground. It doesn't have a woody stem on it. It's a soft stem. And that one we cut to the ground. So Salvia hot lips, which I think is what she's talking about, is very similar. It's not the same, but it's similar to the Salvia greggii, which are Chihuahuan desert plants, Sonoran desert plants. And the desert plants you have to be careful with because they are not used to waking up during the winter. Most of the desert stuff comes alive during the summer and the spring. And so I have killed plants, those desert sages, the Salvia greggii, by cutting them in the dead of winter. It's too cold, it's too wet, and they can't wake up. They can't shake the wet clay soil. And so those desert plants, I wait till it warms up, usually March or April, to prune. Anytime between March and October, you can hammer those desert plants, which I think is what she's talking about. So if you feel like you need to control Salvia hot lips, because it does, if it gets too much water, I've seen it get 7 feet tall. It's just a freaking ball. So if you need to, you can do it now. I might wait to cut it all the way down if it's going to be super hot, right, to avoid burning the plant. But the ideal time, if I could just pick one time, would be March. I would wait to just hammer my my hot lip sage to about a 12-inch ball at that time. Give it a little compost on the side and let it go crazy.
Great. And she did confirm that it was the hot lips. So you were right on track with that. And so I just have a few. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say that I just have a few minutes before we get kicked off of here. So I want to make sure I get in my closing remarks. But George had a follow-up question. I believe this is probably for me. And that was about the low water fruit trees, maybe the edible gardens class. So again, Antonio did do that class I believe it was back in March, and you can find that on Sustainable Ventura's YouTube page. And they actually have a recording of that class. So if you're interested in learning about that, just backtrack to their YouTube page. And then Betty said she loved the class and she is wondering where the Friday and Saturday events are held.
Yeah, they're here in Newbury Park, and you can find them on that SAMO Fund Eventbrite page. We have a nursery here on the National Park land, by the Windy Trail, by Potrero Road. So we're here. You can find the directions and the information on that SAMO Fund Eventbrite.
Great, perfect. And yeah, just a reminder again to everyone, we did record this event. So we will be sending it out in a follow-up email with a link. We'll also include the PowerPoint as well as some of the resources that Antonio has given us in his email. So if you have questions in the future, you can always ask him. And I just want to give a plug to a couple of our programs really quick. I did mention the drip retrofit program, but I'd also like to mention that the City of Ventura does have a lawn removal rebate. So if you do decide to remove your turf and replace it with a low water use landscape, be sure to look at applying for that rebate. You do need to apply for the rebate before you start your project. And I did talk about the drip retrofit, but we also have a free weather-based irrigation controller, so a free smart controller. So we will come and do a direct install of replacing your existing controller with a smart irrigation controller. So if you're interested in those, visit venturawater.net, and I will also include a link to each of those programs in the follow-up email. And if you like this class and you're interested in attending more, join us. I believe it's next month. I'm not hosting the class, but it's for the Healthy Soils class, and that will be hosted by Environmental Sustainability. So if you're interested, check out our Eventbrite page and you can sign up for that class. So that is it for me. Antonio, do you have anything else?
No, I appreciate your guys' time on a Saturday morning. So be safe and feel free to email me if you guys have any questions.
Yes, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. And Antonio, thank you so much. Your classes are always so informative. It's really obvious that you know what you're talking about. So I learned so much.
Hopefully we'll work together soon. Maybe in person.
Definitely. Yeah. Hopefully next year we'll be back in person. But yeah, I've grabbed a bunch of great things from this PowerPoint, especially that UC Davis study. So I will definitely be looking into that here next week. So
yeah. If you get a chance, I mean, you could register. You're considered part of the industry. They're always looking for people to go to Irvine to look. And I don't know if you're looking for an excuse to head out to Irvine, but yeah, it's pretty cool to see their setup. It's amazing.
Great. Well, once again, everyone, really appreciate it. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you on the next one.
All right. Take care, everybody. See ya.
All right. Bye-bye.